Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acomb, as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. On this morning's program, we're going to be talking with Amy from Casa Trinity. We had her on not that long ago, maybe a month or two ago. She is back because there's another groundbreaking at Casa Trinity, and I wanted to learn all about it. So stay tuned for that. We've got a lot to cover as well in regards to Trump, in regards to Biden, of course, but also some New York State issues. Pretty much everything you need to know this morning. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. We already got one wave, which is nice. Comment at any time on the topics we discuss. First, let's start with our Congressman, Nick Langworthy. I received this yesterday. The Congressman has introduced legislation to protect FBI whistleblowers from retaliation. Whistleblowers are essential to oversight of our government agencies, serving as the watchdogs for integrity and accountability. And their protection is a hallmark of a healthy democracy. Unfortunately, the FBI and DOJ have a long history of quieting whistleblowers by pulling security clearances, delaying investigations, and ending their careers. The Protect Whistleblowers from Retribution Act will ensure that those who come forward to do the right thing are able to do so without fearing for their future. Now, what does this act do? Well, let's take a look at it quickly. It will clarify investigative authority. It'll ensure the DOJ Inspector General is the sole independent investigative body for whistleblower retaliation investigations. It will establish reasonable investigative timelines, requiring the DOJ Inspector General to communicate in a consistent and timely manner with the impacted whistleblower and complete the investigation within 240 days, putting a stop to the endless delays. It will protect security clearances, prohibiting the freezing of clearances as a personnel practice, and expunge whistleblower security records if the DOJ is found to have used the clearance in a retaliatory fashion. It will grant equal appeal rights. It secures the FBI whistleblower's right to appeal to the Merit System Protection Board, ensuring that the right is afforded the same as it is to every other federal employee. And finally, it will enhance transparency, require reports from the DOJ Inspector General on the length of investigations into whistleblower retaliation, the number of reprisals determined in such investigations, the number of investigations sent to MSPB, and the number of times the Attorney General did not implement corrective actions. So there you are. Received that yesterday. I wanted to pass that along to you in case you missed it. So we're also going to talk this morning about Netanyahu giving a fiery speech, it's been told, to Senate Republicans. Schumer was asked if he'd want the Netanyahu to speak to the Senate Democrats. Schumer turned him down. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Also, a lot about Letitia James. Some interesting New York updates. Speaking of New York updates, I just want to quickly mention that tomorrow on the program, we're going to be talking with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. There's so much going on in Albany. He was kind enough to come in again and have a chat about what's going on with the budget process. So that'll be on tomorrow's program. You can always send questions for the Assemblyman or to any of our guests at that number on the bottom of your screen. Okay, let's take our first break. When we come back, well, we'll just get into all of it. How about that? Who knows where we'll begin? Because we're just getting started here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. This is Frankly Speaking on Big Fox. So Benjamin Netanyahu blasted Schumer yesterday in a meeting with Senate Republicans. Netanyahu, who made the remarks during a video conference with Senate Republicans after the Senate Majority Leader declined. Keep that in mind. The Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, declined the Israeli Prime Minister's request for an opportunity to address Senate Democrats as well. So were the Senate Democrats too busy to hear a video or have a video conference, I should say? Was it in reference to Chuck Schumer's remarks just a few days ago? Well, Senator Josh Hawley said, quote, he said that he thought Schumer's remarks were wholly inappropriate. And then he said, if you want me to be more frank, I thought they were outrageous. And he said, Israel would never purport to tell the United States how to run our elections, who to elect, and no sovereign state would allow that kind of interference. boy, it's interesting. Chuck Schumer's response to all of this, there has been some pushback. Speaking of that, tying it all in, the United States has submitted a draft resolution to the UN calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza tied to a hostage release. The U.S. has issued a draft resolution to the United Nations Security Council calling for the immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas that would be connected to the release of hostages. That's what Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced. We're pressing for an immediate ceasefire tied to the release of hostages. That would bring immediate relief to so many people who are suffering in Gaza, the children, the women, the men. We actually have a resolution that we put forward right now that's before the United Nations Security Council that does call for an immediate ceasefire tied to the release of hostages, and we hope very much that the countries will support that. I think that would send a strong message, a strong signal. So there's a couple of quick updates. Let's get into the presidential elections, because we're going to jump around a lot today. We just have so many things to cover, and it seems to be one of those days where it's a lot of very different things. So bear with me. And that normally happens on a Friday, but today it's happening on a Thursday. This ties in with what we were just talking about, though. I do have a segue here when I mention the presidential elections. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., someone it seems like we end up talking about quite a bit on this program, gave an interview that was conducted by Reuters and published in the Jerusalem Post. He expressed concern for the humanitarian cost of the war to Palestinian civilians, but said that Israel had no choice but to respond as it had. Now, we mentioned Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The other day, where, was it Monday, that they had that big St. Patrick's meeting? That's not the right word. Get together of the Kennedys at the White House, where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was not invited. But from the interview, he said any other nation that was adjacent to a neighboring nation that was bombing it with rockets, sending commandos over to murder its citizens, pledging itself to murder every person in that nation and annihilate it, would go and level it with aerial bombardment. But Israel is a moral nation, so it didn't do that. Instead, it built an iron dome to protect itself so it would not have to go into Gaza. He said that Hamas gave Israeli leaders no choice after fighters stormed into Israel on October 7th, killing 1,200 people and capturing 250 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. That is very interesting. What I find kind of intriguing about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not his rise in the polls in a way. I mean, his numbers right now, if they were to hold, he would be invited to a debate for president. I, again, have went on record numerous times believing there will not be a debate between Biden and Trump. So I don't think that would be come to fruition for Mr. Kennedy. But the numbers are very interesting. People still talking about that Super Bowl ad, still talking about who potentially could be his vice presidential pick. So I'd like to hear from you on that. What your thoughts of the Kennedy campaign has been thus far. Now, I mentioned that the Assemblyman's going to be on the program tomorrow. And we've talked so many times, and that's Phil Palmisano. We've talked so many times about the green mandates that we're seeing coming out of Albany. Yesterday we talked about it, and so many people weighing in saying the grid's not there, the technology's not there. We know that. The cost to taxpayers will be outrageous. Well, yesterday, the EPA released what it's calling the strongest ever pollution standards for cars. We're going to talk about that when we come back. And then after that break, after we talk for a while and in a couple more breaks, we're going to be talking with Amy from Casa Trinity. So stay with us. We're just getting started on this Thursday morning edition of Frankly Speaking on Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. Excuse me. Man, I'm like right on the verge of coughing. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I am your host, Frank Acomb. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. So Jason Hayes at the New York Post, and I know we've talked about this a lot, and I do have to say, have received so many great comments from viewers on electric vehicles in general, the mandates here in New York. Well, the Environmental Protection Agency released what it calls the strongest ever pollution standards for cars, which it claims will, quote, expand consumer choice in clean vehicles. Now, that's a stretch. These new regulations, which are clearly beyond the EPA's defined powers, overstepping, overreaching, will limit overall vehicle choice and force Americans into expensive and unreliable electric vehicles. I still have to wonder. I don't wonder, and that's the wrong word, but when you have the auto workers unions supporting this administration with policies like this, it goes to show you just how it's more about, I guess, politics at this point, though you can weigh in on that. The EPA expects listen to these numbers. The EPA expects plug-in electric vehicles to make up between 62 and 70% of the automotive market. Do you realize that last year electric vehicles made up 7.6%? So their goal is 62 to 70% electric vehicles, and yet last year we were at 7.6%. American drivers simply aren't embracing EVs. You've got shorter driving ranges. You know how long it takes to refuel, so to speak. And they're very expensive. Do you know, and I learned this today in this piece by Jason Hayes, that the 5-year cost to own an average electric vehicle, the 5-year cost, more than $92,000. Now, if you compare that to the 5-year cost of a gas-powered vehicle, it's $76,500. So your gas-powered vehicle, about, from beginning to end, buying it, maintenance, over 5 years, $76,500. An EV, $92,000. Second, though, readily available charging infrastructure remains elusive for many EV users. Many of the available chargers are level 2, which the magazine U.S. News notes is fine if you have time to kill. Yes, they take a long time to charge. Now, in the face of rapid decreases in the growth of electric vehicle sales, automakers are already scaling back their EV production plans. So again, making that goal of 62 to 70% unrealistic. Biden has been covering up the economic damage this rule will cause, because it will. It is going to hurt the auto industry untold amounts. He's been telling the media his administration will slow its implementation, and the media ran with that. I don't know if you saw the coverage, but the media did indeed run with that. However, the administration has not given up the goal of making electric vehicles total 70% of new sales by the year 2032, so less than 10 years. Achieving that goal in 8 short years is an unattainable and ultimately destructive pipe dream. But just like we see the green rules here in New York coming from Albany, it's not about the realistic nature, it's about the virtue signaling. Look what I'm doing. I care the most about, I guess, the planet in this case. Never mind the cost. Never mind the technology's not there. Never mind the interest is not there. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, we're showing, not doing, we're showing we're going to try to do something. The EPA rule undermines consumer choice and transportation affordability for most Americans. Americans must retain the right to choose vehicles that are tailored to their needs and budget, not to what some Washington bureaucrat demands. You think of the cost of that. You know how expensive it can be to purchase a car in today's climate. But you want that freedom. You want obviously what comes with having an automobile. When do you get priced out of the market totally? When does it become a scenario where it costs you travel time, it costs you going to work, going to school? I mean, these are serious questions. $92,000 over 5 years? Could you come up with that today just to reach a unattainable goal of 70% EV cars by, 2032? So just tie that in with what we're seeing from Albany, and I find it very interesting, very troubling. And we can all kind of shrug our shoulders and say, well, it's unattainable. It's not going to happen. They're pushing forward with it anyway. I mean, I don't know. I don't see a politician stepping in and saying, no. If they came up with the idea, we're part of the idea, saying, no, never mind. We changed our mind. We'll move the goalpost, because that would not be a very good look. So I think here in Albany, in New York, coming from Albany, we'll see, at least in that instance, and we'll talk to Assemblyman Palmisano about it tomorrow, but I think we're going to see us moving forward as a state with all these green mandates. So that all ties in together. But we've got to take a short break because I've got some great comments coming in. We'll read those when we come back after we speak to Amy. Let's see if I can actually read. I'm just going to try to read them live on the air, so wish me luck. They obviously don't take into account how people live in apartments aren't allowed to hook up their own high voltage power stations because they would cost about $6,000 a piece at least. Where in our areas that even possible for thousands of vehicles to possibly get charged? There is never any thought given to the common man or woman. No, that's truer words have never been spoken. It's not about you and I. It's about, again, them showing that they care, that they're doing the most. In the case of New York, that we're doing what California is doing, or trying to do more than California is doing. It's so common, it's almost cliche here in New York State, isn't it? Another comment. Then also, it will put more pressure on the grid and more power outages. Get your generator ready. Yes, the grid is not there. That has been spoken to by many experts time and time again. The grid is simply not ready for what is being proposed by New York and throughout the country. Think of in the summer when we hear about the power outages down south, or in the winter up here. And think of, I know I've said it with Assemblyman Palmisano, and it's not hyperbole. Think of the deaths that this will cause. Now, you could talk about the fires and the EVs and like that too. But I'm just saying, in the cold winter months when you lose power for how long, it's just not sustainable. But again, it's still being pushed. I keep getting so many texts. Yeah, here's a really great point. Having enough problems paying for the increase in gas, LOL. Yes, I agree. Pardon me. That's already tough enough with a gas-powered automobile. But I do think there's a really good point. I don't want to run too long on a tangent here. To the viewer's point that if you have an apartment, for instance, where are you going to plug these in? Yeah, I mean, very often they'll say, well, there's these charging stations. Well, yeah, you're talking hours. Do you also, after buying that $92,000 over a 5-year vehicle, EV vehicle, do you then want to spend the money to adapt your house so you can charge it there? I mean, the cost is just not, well, obviously affordable, and for many, it's just not possible. It's not doable. Let's see. Here's one. They need to concentrate on hybrids first. Yes. That's a win-win because of increased range, mileage, and lower emissions. Yeah, but sometimes it seems like it's all or nothing, doesn't it? And that's why the EPA's goal, that is why the EPA's goal is 70% of new car sales being EV by 2032, when last year EV cars were at, what I say, 7.6% of sales. All right, we've got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Amy from Casa Trinity. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acomb. We're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street. And joining us in the studio again, backed by popular demand, Amy, thanks so much for being on the program.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You know, I joke about that, but there was such an outpouring last time. I think I asked you last time on the program, like, what it felt like when there was a success story, right? Yeah. And how amazing it must feel for you and for all the staff. And I felt like, even though my only job was to ask you questions, it was a success. Because people kept coming up and saying, this is exactly what I needed at this moment to hear more about Casa Trinity, and like reaching out to me. I thought that was amazing.
I love that.
So I got a little taste of what you guys experience every day.
Much.
Isn't that nice? So it is backed by popular demand. And last time we talked, I joked how busy you were. It turns out you didn't even tell us how busy you actually were. So you have another groundbreaking.
We have a groundbreaking happening. Yeah, we over on in Elmira, on the corners of Church and Judson.
Okay.
So that first exit off Elmira when you're coming from Horseheads. We are building it's a 3-part program on that corner of the property.
Oh, wow.
That will include a crisis stabilization center,
okay,
a residential program, and our mental health clinic that we just had the ribbon cutting for,
right,
over on Water Street. Once this project is complete, that clinic will actually move and be part of the 3-part.
Okay. Well, so that's interesting. So how do you judge what you're going to put in this area? Is it by need? Is it by, I mean, I guess maybe that's kind of a foolish question.
No, it's not at all. It is by need. So this specific project actually, we were one of 9 organizations to receive the funding to be able to do this.
Okay.
And that was back in 2022, where Governor Hochul had chosen 9 organizations to do the stabilization centers, just to help with behavioral health crises that were happening, especially post-COVID.
Yeah, of
and
course.
lots of things that were happening. So as far as this region, the next closest ones are like Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo.
Oh.
And then it goes to like mid-Hudson and down towards the city. So there's 9 of these popping up across the states, or across New York State. But it's going to be a really great thing.
Well, and the Crisis Center itself, what I've heard is it's the first of its kind in Chemung County.
It is.
And there's got to be a need in Chemung County like there is everywhere for this
Yeah.
type of service.
Well, and so this is going to be a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week open
Wow.
kind of location. And the idea behind it is it's a welcoming, safe place for people that need help in this moment. So rather than going to the emergency room,
Right.
if they're having symptoms of crisis and have a substance use disorder, mental health crisis need in that way, they can come to us in that moment and get help, and also stay up to 24 hours until we can figure out what kind of level of care they may need and how to get them there.
That's got to be so much better than just going into like kind of an emergency room where you're not getting that specialized help.
Well, and I mean, anybody in crisis, right?
Right.
When you're
Yeah.
in that moment, and then, the pressure of seeing other people, and you're kind of in that vulnerable state of
Yeah, of
like
course.
wanting to hide, but also, you need help, and how do I manage this, and what do I do, where do I go? We're going to be that location that you can do that. We'll have the mental health clinicians there as well. So that'll be kind of one building of the property. The second part of the property will have the residential program. So we might have touched on this in the last time, but it's your program in between an outpatient and an inpatient facility.
Okay.
So if, depending on what level of care you've needed, you can go and stay and get stabilized, reintegrated into the community. We help with resume writing and get you set up so that once you get back into the community and in, starting your outpatient services, you already have, transportation set up. If
What a
we can
great
help with
idea.
housing, if we can help with getting a job, those kinds of things, and giving you those pillars.
Yeah.
So once that you exit our doors, you're set up for success.
I was just going to say, because that must be, in some instances, the toughest part, thinking about what's coming next after all this.
Oh yeah, and especially too for those that are just getting back up on their feet, and there's all degrees of that, right? But for when you're getting back on your feet and you're getting back into living life outside of a very stable environment where it's empowering and encouraging, and there's therapies happening and things like that, and you're just kind of getting back to yourself.
Right.
It can be scary
Yeah,
to
of
then
course.
think of it. Once I leave here, how can I continue that?
Right.
So it's really important, but it's such a great thing to be able to offer to folks and get them going again.
Well, it was great to go to the last ribbon cutting, even if I was late. But
We
so,
won't judge you.
so I would encourage people to go to this groundbreaking so that they can see just a little bit, a quick look of inside what this is all going to look like.
Yeah, so the main structure that's currently there is actually, we've been able to get that gutted on the inside, so we can actually enter the space just as kind of a preliminary
Sure.
see prior to construction. You can
Yeah.
kind of see what we're looking at first. And then we'll have everybody come outside. We have some speakers that'll be there. And then we have our shovels and our hard hats ready, and we'll be able to do the actual groundbreaking from there. So
And that's at 1 o'clock on Friday.
it's at 1 o'clock, yeah.
So just in general, because we were talking about specifically the groundbreaking and a little bit of everything else, but for those that, like last time, because it did get such a great reaction, what kind of services do you provide at Casa Trinity if people aren't aware?
So we offer prevention education. So
Okay.
we have some of our team members are in schools, or also doing community kind of trainings with parents and things like that. We have the treatment aspect, so that's outpatient, inpatient, the residentials. We do have some supportive living out in our Olean locations. Then you get into recovery. So that is going to be our Adventures in Recovery programs and our youth clubhouses.
Okay.
And then we also have outreach. So that team is working with those that maybe we haven't seen in a little while, trying to reconnect them, engage them in services, or at
that's
least see
interesting.
how they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that full continuum of care in regards to how we do things. But
So it's not just when they're out the door, see you later. I mean, you guys are there right for the long haul. Wow.
And if we need to meet people where they are, that's something that the team will do too.
No kidding.
It's one of those things that, again, there's all different types of crisis and or people and helping people. So meeting people where they are is a huge thing, because it creates that level of comfort with each other. So in that case, it's our peers that will go out and try to engage with clients or past clients that we haven't seen in some time, just to check in, see how they're doing, see where they're at. And with a peer, they've been in those shoes.
Right.
They're people in recovery, so they have that relatability with a person to be able to say, you can do this.
Right.
It's absolutely possible.
So it's almost forged relationships, I'm sure, in some ways, where it's there's that bond there of we've been through this together in a way.
Yeah, and you have that camaraderie with each other.
So who, if anybody's watching, who would you say your services are for? Anybody that is in need?
Anybody, yeah. It's one of those things that, and I think that we also touched on this last time, where stigma is a huge thing. Substance use disorders, mental health things, it doesn't discriminate on who it gets.
Right.
And to what degree it gets them at. So knowing that you have resources and people out there that can help you with that, you're taking care of your health. It's not any different than going to a medical doctor.
Right.
You're just getting the care that you need to be able to get better.
And you have a lot of locations.
We have a lot of locations.
If I needed to fill time on this interview, that's why I saved it right till the end. No, I have other questions. But I mean, probably the best for people to do is to go online and find those locations, right?
Yeah.
One thing I want to touch on before we do go is mental health first aid classes. Now, what is this? This is pretty brand new.
Pretty brand new. We've done a couple rounds of them, but it is getting more off the ground because it's something that a lot of folks in human services and behavioral health are trying to kind of get certified in. We have classes coming up, and they're all listed on our website as well. Under the prevention tab, you'll find it under the community wellness. But that is where Tracy she's a prevention educator out of Livingston County. She actually is hosting the trainings to where she's partnered with the Genesee Valley Health Partnership, or GVHP.
Of course.
All the acronyms.
That's what I call it.
All the acronyms. And then we also have a collaboration with the National Council of Mental Wellbeing. So in collaboration of the three of us, we're putting together these trainings for folks. Now there's two different types. One round of classes that are based on those that work with adults.
Okay.
Or have adults in their life that may be in need of that. There's also classes geared towards working with youth.
Oh.
So it gives two different types of certifications in that way. And it really broadens people's scope to things of mental health.
I would imagine. So if someone is watching this and they say, well, I might not be in, I hope somebody's watching this. Why did I word it like that? If all the people watching this and they say, I may not need your services, but I want to help because this is an amazing organization. Do you have volunteers? Do you accept donations? Those type of things?
We do. So we have volunteer opportunities. You can also catch those on the website, and you'd be working with our human resources department to kind of see what's available. We have internships that we do and offer. We also have a donations page on the website. Being that we are a nonprofit, we love the help that we can get. And it's also great because you can choose where you want to donate. So if it's to an outpatient part of the programs, the youth clubhouses, prevention, any of those things, you can't imagine how little amounts go so far.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. So I was going to ask what's next, but is there a lot? Because I can just wait and have you on again the program next time in a couple weeks.
Well, probably a few weeks.
Once a
we'll
month
be talking
here.
about the 50th anniversary.
Oh, that's
stuff.
right. I forgot you mentioned that. Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of things happening. We have some other ribbon cuttings that'll be happening this year. We have our 5K that will be on September 28th of this year up in Dansville.
Okay.
So there's volunteer opportunities there. And we're also, getting out into the community to get fundraising going, and it's a big event, and so it takes a lot of manpower in that way. But it's so much fun. And yeah, we're kind of doing a traveling celebration with the 50th.
Well, that's a great. Well, you have to
have things happening, so we're kind of celebrating everywhere we are.
Well, yeah. So I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
All right, Amy. Thanks so much for being on the show, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Talk soon.
All right, stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. Thank you to Amy from Casa Trinity for joining us again on the program. Really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be talking to her again soon. We received a lot of comments during the last few moments. First, just think back to Al Gore pushing his climate and green energy stuff. It was originally global warming, then climate, then green. It got kind of tricky there for a while. He made millions of dollars and was one of the biggest users of energy in the country. Remember, this agenda is based on conjecture and falsehoods, no facts to support any of it. You know, it's interesting when you think of how much he did make at the time. And it's not just him. It's all the people pushing the agenda that are then flying around the world in their private planes, private jets, to attend hearings and attend meetings about climate change. Is always very interesting. Okay, moving on. Oh, one other comment. I like this one. I've decided to go with a horse instead of an EV, but I'll do the right thing and name him Tesla. I like it. I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good way to meet right in the middle. Hey, I know immigration has been polling at about number one in concerns by voters. Sometimes it's the economy, sometimes it's immigration. Did you hear, and I had to learn about this from the New York Post, I've not seen it elsewhere, but immigration judges dismissed deportation cases against some 200,000 migrants under President Biden because the Department of Homeland Security failed to file the required paperwork before their court dates. This is according to a new report by Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse, which is at Syracuse University. It's a bipartisan or a nonpartisan organization. The DHS's failure to file thousands of notices to appear before scheduled hearing dates left courts without jurisdiction to handle deportation cases and rule on asylum claims. That's according to the report. Quote, these large numbers of dismissals and what then happens raises serious concerns. The nonpartisan research organization called it troubling that there was an almost total lack of transparency on where and why these DHS failures occurred. Equally troubling is the lack of solid information on what happened to these many immigrants when DHS never rectified its failure by reissuing and filing new NTAs to restart their court cases. Now, NTAs, notices to appear, are issued when migrants are apprehended illegally crossing the border into the U.S. We've talked about this in the past. Migrants claiming asylum are assigned a hearing date, often years and years in advance, where they are offered the opportunity to explain to an immigration judge why they shouldn't be deported. But the notices to appear must also be filed with the court where the individual is told to appear for the hearing to take place. Almost, and this is a quote from the report, almost all immigration court cases are removal cases for which DHS must file an NTA for the case to go forward. Cases dismissed because of NTAs not being filed jumped when Biden took office from just 6,482 in 2020. I say just, but you'll understand why when I read the next number. In 2021, 1 year later, 33,802. And I don't want to go into reading too many numbers here because I know that gets a little bit wonky. But something that, again, I don't believe you're hearing elsewhere. Now, the Post did reach out, the New York Post reached out to DHS for comment, and you can imagine there was no response. Also on that, piggybacking, well, you know what? We'll piggyback on that in just a moment because I believe, yes, I'm running just a tad bit late. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acomb. Just reading a comment. That's why you got no music. We were talking about immigration and Biden's administration failing to file paperwork, which caused 200,000 migrant deportation cases to be tossed. Receiving this message, I'm going to just read it quickly because we've got to take another short break. No doubt that DHS never filed paperwork. I've been waiting 2 years for my very simple green card renewal that I paid for. Now that I can no longer travel because of this, they're trying to get some action behind it. Congressman Langworthy is trying to get some heat on it. And DHS doesn't even respond to requests. And if you call the number, it's run exclusively by robots. They don't even help paying customers who are already here paying taxes and raising American kids. It's alarming, really. So, yes, I'm sure the congressman's office working at it hard, but DHS, I mean, well, it's one thing after another. Democrat cities that welcomed migrants are starting to roll back aid. Isn't that interesting how that happens? Again, going back to what we've talked about, it seems like all morning long, the virtue signaling, that it all looked good on paper until we saw, like in New York and Chicago, they've instituted substantial changes to their shelter policies. In Chicago, the city began evicting migrants who had overstayed a new 60-day time limit. In New York, migrants had benefited from the city's unique right to shelter, which guarantees emergency housing for as long as anyone needs it. Last Friday, those rules were significantly altered for migrants without children, the culmination of a months-long struggle by the city to curtail its legal obligations. Interesting how that works. Also, just on a side note, Florida and Governor DeSantis has vowed to send Haitian migrants to Martha's Vineyard and deploys more soldiers to barricade the coastline, with gangs roaming and hunting the wealthy and looting mansions. This is interesting. That's in Port-au-Prince, I'm sorry. But the Florida governor has already dispatched more than 130 extra police and state guards to the coast after 25 armed Haitians were found in a boat. All right, one more quick thing before we go to break, because we have a lot to get to, and I saw our time, and we are running out of time. This is why I look so forward to our 2-hour change. It's going to be 2 hours starting on April the 1st, beginning at 6 a.m. Did you see AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, claimed in that hearing with Tony Bobulinski yesterday that RICO is not a crime? She was asking, what crime did the president commit? Why are we doing this impeachment hearing? What crime? She's asking Bobulinski this. And he said, how much time do I have to go through it? Before listing off several items such as corruption statutes, RICO, and conspiracy. Foreign Agents Registration Act. Well, what is the crime, sir? AOC said specifically. Bobulinski said, you asked me to answer the question. I answer the question. RICO, you're obviously not familiar with it. Corruption statutes, FARA, Foreign Agents Registration Act. That's when Ocasio-Cortez interjected in what I would deem a condescending tone, saying, excuse me, sir, RICO is not a crime. It is a category. So he said, oh, no, it's a category of a crime that you are then charged with. Now, keep in mind, if you've been paying attention, former President Donald Trump and over a dozen of his allies were charged in a sprawling racketeering case out of Fulton County last August. So I'm not sure that RICO, by the way, Racketeering, Influence, and Corruption Organization Act. Many taking to Twitter. Representative Wesley Hunt wrote, AOC broken in Hunter Biden hearing. So broken, in fact, she claims RICO isn't a crime. Well, empty the jails. Oh, and for the record, all the defendants in the Georgia case brought by Fani Willis falls under RICO. Anyway, that was just a quick one. Before we go to break, stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on Big Fox. Look at that beautiful view of Market Street. Almost looks like a painting, doesn't it? We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm Frank Acomb. Thanks so much for joining us. I meant to bring this up earlier because I'd love to hear your opinion on it. Did you hear about the former NBC executive? He's been receiving a lot of backlash because what happened is when Barron Trump, the youngest son of Donald Trump and Melania, turned 18, when he turned 18, the former NBC executive said now he's fair game. Now, I would argue that the media never really declared him off limits. There was a lot of nasty comments through the years about the young son of Donald Trump because it tends to be that the first family is not off limits when there is an R next to a president's name. We can go back to the Bush daughters and we can look at the coverage of the Obama daughters, see the difference there. But a former NBC honcho, according to Fox News, sparked intense backlash for suggesting that Trump's youngest son was now fair game because he turned 18 years old. Mike Singleton, a retired NBC Universal senior executive who is better known for his pro-liberal social media posts, commemorated Barron Trump's birthday on Wednesday, saying, quote, Barron Trump turns 18 today. He's fair game now. Now, many reading into that various ways. He then deleted the post and walked back the comment, but of course did not apologize. He said, I posted he was fair game now, meaning as an adult, he's fair game for criticism from the press. Yes, because we know Barron's been just so politically active. Someone pointed out to me that fair game could mean fair game to be harmed. I don't wish physical harm or anything, so I took it down. I listened to the comments and the criticism I received. Wow, how honorable of you. We know that they picked on him on Saturday Night Live. If you recall, actor Peter Fonda, back in 2018, said that rip Barron Trump from his mother's arms and put him in a cage with pedophiles. That's what Peter Fonda said. So I don't know when he was ever off limits to the media and others. I think that's a despicable post. I think it is huge double standard when it comes to various presidencies of whose families are and are not off limits. I do think also the family should be off limits. You can make the argument that Trump's adult sons who are political aren't. I think that's a fair assessment. If you get political, if you can't pay, okay. But when you're talking about a young man who just turned 18 and to celebrate his 18th birthday, you put that he's now fair game, shows you a level of delusion and anger and hatred for, in this case, for his father. But we've got to take our last break. Then we're going to wrap things up here on Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we are wrapping up this morning's edition. Unbelievable how fast it goes. That's why we're so excited for 2 hours starting April 1st. Letitia James doubts Trump is truly unable to come up with $454 million bond. And boy, I'm telling you, that's just not the case. I'm not a big Hugh Hewitt fan, but he has a piece out that says, due process for you, but not for Trump. I think this is set a very dangerous precedent, what has happened in this case. If you also look at what it does for New York State and its business climate, it's, you know it. Anyway, they're suggesting the New York Post has an exclusive, not from Trump himself, but from insiders who say that he may not pay the bond and instead let Letitia James seize Trump Towers. That now poses some risk, but he would get that money back. Even if there is a taking, it doesn't mean he can't take it back later. But the problem would be, of course, then he couldn't perhaps get that actual building, of course. And then CNN has a different take on it, of course. Trump can't pay his bond in legal judgments. Why that's dangerous. So I said, wow, this is free to get us. I wonder what she's going to say. Does she actually see how wrong this has been? Let's take a look at it. No, it turns out she just thinks because if Trump becomes basically broke, which, as she put to his critics, the thinking is that any obstacle in Trump's path puts him further from the presidency and so makes the country safer. Well, isn't that nice? At least she told us exactly what the plan is. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. The ends justify the means as long as you don't get to vote for him. No, she said because he could be bought. He'll be bought by some foreign country and sell us out. Hey, last thing. Another unintended consequence of legalized marijuana in New York State: rise in children unknowingly consuming edible cannabis products in New York. In 2019, the Upstate New York Poison Center had about 7 calls reported. 2019. And in 2023, 211. We are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to Amy from Casa Trinity for being our guest. Tomorrow, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. Thank you to those who have sent in questions for him already. It's not too late. Send your questions in at any time, and he'll be joining us bright and early tomorrow morning, like I hope that you will as well. Starting at 7 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox will see you tomorrow morning.